Good evening, and welcome to our French and Indian War lecture here for Unit 3. We'll be discussing the French and Indian War at a pretty quick pace today, and then we'll focus on the impact that's going to have on future American and British relations. And we'll also talk about the causes of the war and just the ramifications there. So the key question you should ask yourself, we talked a lot about salutary neglect and the conditions existing in the colonies, and why was 1763 a key year, a key turning point. So keep that in mind. This is one of those landmark dates, 1763, that you really need to know because it does establish the beginning, kind of the end of the British control in North America. So let's take a look real quick at North America by 1750. And as you can see, the disputed area here throughout the Ohio River Valley, up in Canada, was a very big issue. And I know the French and the British really held that area in high regard due to its high fur trade, and also just the fact that colonies were expanding because of the settlement from the English. And by 1752, the Ohio Valley was pretty much the subject of a competing claim by Virginia, Pennsylvania, but also the French and the Iroquois, as well as other Indians who existed there. So the next year, the French began building a chain of forts that would link the Ohio River with Louisiana and block British expansion westward. So essentially, in this disputed area claim, you can see here, the French are going to build a series of forts to prevent British expansion. Virginia retaliated by sending a 21-year-old surveyor, a young speculator named George Washington, to demand that the French abandon their forts in the Allegheny River. The French refused, so Washington recommended and was approved in Virginia to return in 1754 300 colonial volunteers and 100 British regulars. Washington found the French already constructing Fort Duquesne at the junction of the Monongahela and Allegheny Rivers. So he built a very crude defensive position about 60 miles southeast called Fort Necessity, pretty much near which his men killed several French soldiers in an ambush. So really, to be honest with you, Washington fired the first shots of the French-Indian War. And on July 4th, ironically, in 1754, after losing 1/4 of his men in a day-long battle, Washington surrendered Fort Necessity to an enemy force 4 times larger than his own and led the survivors home. Now, at that juncture, tensions were incredibly high, so war is going to be on the horizon, and the 7 Years' War will begin, because this is also a control over the continent of Europe as well. This is a long-standing rivalry. So you can see here again, there's Fort Necessity, there's Fort Duquesne. These are the long range of forts that were built by the French to prevent English expansion, and that's where the first confrontation took place. Hey, sorry for the interruption. So let's move on here. In 1754, another very significant event took place. This is the Albany Plan of Union, the meeting of the Albany Congress. And this is a very familiar image. This image was actually drawn by Benjamin Franklin in 1754. It was a well-known cartoon before the Albany Congress even convened, and the snake symbolized the colony's considerable divisions, I guess you could say, a disunity that political leaders would have to struggle against for a long time and years to come. But this is going to symbolize the disunity that Franklin feared would prevent the Albany Plan of Union from happening. And the Plan of Union was very simple. It was a plan for mutual defense. They hoped to shower the Iroquois with gifts like, 30 wagons loads of weapons to appease them, but it was created for defense. And the delegates then at this Albany Congress convened and endorsed a proposal for a colonial confederation, the Plan of Union. And it was based mostly from Franklin's ideas and Massachusetts Governor Thomas Hutchinson. They called for creating a Grand Council with a President General. They would have policy, military defense, Indian affairs, and it could demand funds from the colonies in the form of taxes. Now, the reason why it fails, colonies were very unwilling to give up their freedoms, whether it be for their taxation or their economy. It was a very selfish time for those colonies, and they were just really unwilling to give in this situation. In their opinion, they had too much to lose. But again, one of the first key steps towards unification, I think that's really critical. Now, in understanding why they wanted to negotiate with the Iroquois Confederacy, they were an incredibly powerful group. They were excellent traders. They created a strong business relationship. They actually did play both French and British off each other. They liked to have this uneasy balance, but eventually they are going to side with the British. And it's going to help us a little bit in this war, but the Iroquois Confederacy is a very powerful group who needs to be reckoned with, and we're going to do whatever we can to concede to their wishes because we need them on our side in this French-Indian War. So we were willing to negotiate, we were willing to bribe, we were willing to do anything, as were the French too, making significant promises. And the French are going to promise the Iroquois and other people that, hey, we'll eliminate the British, we respect your rights here. And there's a fear of Great Britain and the settlers here because they don't seem to want to go. They're expanding, and they know that. So in 1755, General Edward Braddock, his job was to evict the French from the Ohio Valley, very similar to what Washington was proposed to do. But Braddock is going to die on Fort Duquesne, and what's going to happen is the French are going to have a very humongous success in that debacle of an attack. And the only success we had in 1755 was we were able to expel the French from Louisiana, and the British presence could be felt down there. That's where you had the Cajun refugees head in that region. But in 1756 is when things really pick up, and war is formally declared. The Native American tribes are exploited on both sides, like I mentioned before. Lord Loudon is going to lead our policy here in the New World, and then Marquis de Montcalm from France is going to engineer the French side of this 7 Years' War, which is actually taking place as well in Europe. So as you can see, there's extreme tensions in the region, but there are some major differences here. The British are going to bring men in to fight, but they're going to have to combine and work with the militia. And there are some significant tensions there. The colonial men are used to hunting, Indian-style guerrilla tactics, hide behind trees. The British, incredibly disciplined, marching in formation. Our organization, colonial militias served under their own captains. The British officers wanted to take charge of colonials. And there's going to be a definite difference, like a class difference as well in their military organization. The colonials are going to be a little rough around the edges. The British are well drilled and tough. Financially, we're not going to be too keen on raising taxes to fight this war. And the British on the other side think that we should pay for our own defense. That is going to be a major, major difference and a huge rift between the two groups. And again, we're going to be very casual, non-professional. The British, some prima donna, spoiled silver spoon in their mouth soldiers leading that fight. So there's going to be incredible tension on both sides of this united front. Now, a huge change comes into play in the 7 Years' War with the addition of William Pitt as the foreign minister. They called him actually the Great Commoner. They loved him in America. He understood our concerns, and he did offer a compromise. And this is incredibly significant. I think this is really, really important. He said basically, provide us with a military, cooperate with us, be loyal, and we'll reimburse you and your assemblies for any cost you have because we need money to fight this war. He made a deal with them, and it helped. They removed Lord Loudon. Colonial morale was improved. It increased by 1758, and Pitt had success. Instead of dilly-dallying in the Ohio River Valley, he went right after the French strongholds up in Canada, and he had success. He's able to turn the tide in that 3-year span, and as you can tell here, major victories in this region up through Canada, taking Louisbourg, which was very costly to many Englishmen. However, it was a huge success, a great victory. And Spain eventually does become an ally of the French at that time period. Now, we achieved victory in 1763. Um, and here's the outcome of the 1763 Treaty of Paris. This is very important. I mean, Pitt played a huge role in changing the tide of the war. France lost her Canadian possessions, most of her empire in India, and claims the lands east of the Mississippi River. So that disputed territory, gone. This basically eliminates the French from North America. I mean, they're gone. And India at this point on becomes a major British colony as well. That's huge. That's critical. Spain got all French lands west of the Mississippi River. New Orleans, they lost Florida to England. In England, my gosh, we got everything. French lands in Canada, exclusive rights to the Caribbean slave trade, and basically commercial dominance in the Indian Ocean. So the British made out very, very well. So here's how things changed. Look in 1763. You have the disputed territory, gone. Okay? And to be honest with you, a lot of native populations were a little upset about this, because here's the British here for the long term, and we're not going anywhere. You know, the effect it had on England, the effect it had on the colonists, it increased their empire. But here's the big thing, number two. You asked about why 1763 is a turning point. It greatly enlarged England's debt. And when a government is in debt, what do they got to do? They got to tax. Tax, tax, and more tax. Okay? The other thing that's going to happen is there's going to be a little contempt between the two. England's going to see kind of how Americans are behaving in a very unique way, this own culture, its independence, and it's going to bring up some questions, and there's going to be some questions about reorganizing the empire. It might be necessary, and that's going to end that salutary neglect. That is why it's so critical that you understand this effect. Salutary neglect is over. The British are in our business. And here it is against the colonials. It united us for the first time against the common enemy. We socialized for all colonials and participate. It was a unified front. And we really, really felt that we contributed to this. But those bitter feelings, because the British thought they were the ones who were responsible for our victory, it did cause some tension between the two groups. But like I said, it was a mass movement. We were unified. This caused considerable pride in our colonists, you know, and we were prepared to fight. We gained some valuable experience fighting, some really valuable experience, which will come in handy in about a decade. Now, as for the effect of the war on Native Americans, for the Indians of the Ohio Valley, the third major party in the French-Indian War, the British victory was bad. Essentially, if you allied yourself with the French, you're in big trouble. The Iroquois Confederacy, which allied itself with Britain, fared only slightly better. The alliance quickly unraveled, and the Confederacy began to crumble from within. They tried to fight off the English in the Ohio River Valley for another 50 years, but they were never again in a position to deal with their white rivals on terms of military or political equality, because they couldn't play them off both sides. And the big fear, the reason why you're going to see very rarely the Indians siding with the British right now is because they know the British are here to stay. The colonists are here to stay. And they're expanding. And that means an end to their way of life. So it's a significant impact on the Native American population. So hopefully, besides hearing the announcements in the background, you learned a little bit today about the French-Indian War. And make sure you use that information and the questions that are on your online syllabus to help take down notes. And we'll discuss this stuff tomorrow. So make sure you also summarize your notes. Try to do an identification on the French-Indian War and why it's so important. Thanks and have a great day. See you guys.